Did you know that John Wilkes Booth was a 33rd degree Freemason and most likely a Union spy who worked for Stanton? There is documented evidence of Booth giving false information and knowingly giving false information to Southern agents when he would go on the road down south with theater companies to perform plays. So there is a strong indication that he could have been a double agent, but he was most likely simply a Union spy. Did you know that Mary Todd Lincoln, 2 weeks prior to the assassination, purchased $1,200, roughly the equivalent of $25,000 in today's currency, worth of mourning and funeral clothes? And it is rumored that she also purchased a coffin. Now, everyone knows she's crazy at this point, especially Abe. But put yourself in his position. You come home one day and find a whole bunch of mourning clothes and black funeral gowns strewn about. Honestly, it's time to put her out of the house. I know you have to be sensitive when it comes to mental illness, but I mean, that is what we call a red flag. I don't know if the coffin part is true, but there's evidence that she purchased the mourning clothes and the funeral attire, which is in and of itself quite enough. Again, this just gets weirder and weirder. Also, keep in mind that Mary Lincoln owned and carried a Derringer pistol, a pearl handle Derringer pistol that was never recovered. And I don't know if this makes any difference or not, but she was also an opium addict and she was left-handed. So put a pin in that. Did you know that the attack, the supposed alleged attack on William Seward probably never even happened? He was wounded, according to the official story, in the same exact places as his injuries from a fall from a carriage he had a couple of weeks prior to that. So that is really coincidental. The guy's laying at home trying to heal up from some injuries he had from falling from a horse-drawn carriage a couple of weeks earlier, and somebody comes and attacks him and stabs him in those exact same spots. I mean, what are the odds? But that's the official story. So Seward was supposedly recuperating after being severely injured in a fall from a horse-drawn carriage 9 days earlier. Seward had suffered a broken lower jaw, a fractured right arm, torn ligaments in his foot, and heavy bruising over much of his body. And these were the exact same injuries reported after his attack, which appears to have been staged. Conveniently, the first 3 people to arrive at that crime scene just happened to be Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, Secretary of the Navy Gideon Welles, and Surgeon General Joseph Barnes. So, I mean, again, this thing just gets crazier and crazier. The guy who was supposedly had attacked Stanton, Lewis Payne or Lewis Powell, depending on who you talk to, had never been to the Seward home, ever. But the official story is he knew exactly how to find Seward. I mean, this was a big house. But he went right directly to the guy's bedroom and stabbed him. He only had a knife and a bludgeon. And a bludgeon is like, you don't hear that word much these days. It's like a shillelagh or like a table leg or the leg from a piano stool. It's just like it's something that you use just to beat the shit out of somebody. Supposedly, this guy, Lewis Payne or Powell, gravely wounded 6 people in hand-to-hand combat, and 4 of them were supposedly able-bodied men, and yet, as photos taken after his arrest just days later revealed, that he didn't have even so much as a scratch. So this thing just gets more and more insane. Did you know that John Wilkes Booth's body was never positively identified after he was supposedly shot and killed at Garrett's farm in Virginia? A man named John Boyd was identified as the man who was killed. A tall, red-headed man in a rebel uniform introduced himself at the Garrett home as John Boyd. During the standoff in the barn with Booth's supposed would-be captors, the name Booth was never even spoken by anyone. When David Harold, the co-conspirator who escaped D.C. with Booth, surrendered and exited the barn, leaving his companion inside the barn, he insisted that he did not know the other man, who claimed his name was Boyd. Both Dr. John May and an enlisted man both claimed that the dead man was not Booth. Did you know that the telegraph service went out in D.C. after the Lincoln assassination? For 2 to 3 hours, there was an interruption in the telegraph service in and out of Washington following the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, which was reminiscent of the JFK assassination, when the phone service in D.C. went out for an hour after he was assassinated. So, I mean, you can believe in coincidence, but that is one hell of a coincidence if you would believe in that type of thing. Did you know that Major Rathbone, who was supposedly very seriously injured in his scuffle with John Wilkes Booth, showed no signs of being injured at any time, and there was no record that he was ever treated for any injuries? No one at the theater saw blood on Booth's knife, on his hands, or on his clothes. No one saw any blood on Major Rathbone, on his person, on his clothes, or on the floor of the theater box. In addition, there was not enough time between the gunshot and the stage exit for a struggle with Rathbone to have taken place. His fiancée never screamed, never said a word, and apparently didn't do anything. Never, even after the whole thing was over, she never made a sound. I mean, what? Supposedly, no one screamed until Booth left the stage and Mary Lincoln finally screamed. So, you have a guy who shot and another guy who supposedly stabbed. No one says anything. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's hard to believe that people even believe that. Did you know that the gas lights, which was the mode of lighting that they had in DC at that time for street lights, the gas lights went out along Booth's escape route, and only along Booth's escape route. At the same time that the telegraph system mysteriously went down, someone at the gasworks on Maryland Avenue shut off the gas that fed the lights around the Capitol and westward along Pennsylvania Avenue, plunging the assassination's escape route into darkness at the most opportune time. Coincidence after coincidence. It's ridiculous. Did you know that Booth's body was not only never positively identified at Garrett's barn, it was also never positively identified at the coroner's inquest. During the alleged inquest, none of Booth's peers in the theater community, many of whom were present in Washington at the time, were brought on board the ship that Booth's body was on to ID the body. No members of the Booth family were enlisted to view the body at all. And none of Booth's so-called or alleged co-conspirators, many of whom were being held on the very same ship, were allowed to ID the body. A total of 13 people were permitted to view the body. All but the war photographer Alexander Gardner and his assistant and a hotel bellhop or clerk were connected to the War Department. So everyone except those 3 people had ties to Stanton and the War Department. It's insane. Did you know that Mary Lincoln handpicked and selected by name Sergeant John Parker, the soldier who would abandon his post and leave the door to the theater box at Ford's Theater unguarded, and he went to get drunk of his own admission. And this is who Mary Lincoln selected by name and insisted on being Abe's bodyguard, and even wrote a letter of recommendation for. Now, here's a guy who had a reputation for being unreliable and often being involved in what was known as misconduct. Keep in mind, not only was John Parker never disciplined for leaving the door unguarded to go and get drunk, he was never even questioned as a possible conspirator. Over 2,000 people were arrested as possible conspirators, but Parker was not one of them. There is no record that he was even questioned as a part of the investigation. So, again, extremely suspect. And finally, did you know that the man who supposedly shot the man who everyone believed to be Booth at Garrett's barn was not Boston Corbett as stated in the official story? It was a man named Everton Conger. And there is strong evidence that suggests that Everton Conger had shoot-to-kill orders for Booth. In other words, there was no way that Booth was going to be brought back to D.C. alive. More than likely because he was going to start naming names. And if the man who was killed was actually not Booth, as it now seems was the case, then that is the irony of all ironies. Because that means that Booth had apparently outsmarted these guys. So, we're going to take a look at a lot of these things a bit closer. There will definitely be more Did You Know segments on the upcoming episodes of the Lincoln assassination.